In the presentation, we have changed the following names to more common names for this specific time period. We changed Hero to Mary, Benedict to Daniel, Claudio to Dwight, and Don Pedro to Donnie. When speaking about the scenes, we will address them as the names mentioned in the book.
The scenes portrayed in Act 1 were when the men, Claudio, Benedict, and Don Pedro, returned from war. It was very common for men to be sent off to war due to men being drafted in. Claudio, Benedict, and Don Pedro are walking up the driveway with cigarettes in their mouth. Back in the 1950s, cigarettes were used by a high majority of people. They were commonly referred to as weed. The men were dressed in nicer clothing because they were coming home to a higher class family. The second scene is Claudio and Benedict in the basement of the house while Hero walks up the stairs. Claudio is confessing his love by saying, "I'm real gone," which is slang for madly in love with. By Benedict calling her stag, he means that she is nothing special and that he sees her as not being worth it. Hero is in a flowery dress because in the 1950s, sundresses were very common and mass-produced. A lot of clothing was mass-produced because America became very advanced in mass-producing clothing due to providing uniforms for soldiers. Clothing providers in the U.S. commonly mass-produced what was in style, therefore a lot of people wore similar clothing. Hero was likely giving the men something such as drinks or food because the women were still socially obligated to follow the command of men.
The scenes portrayed in Act 2 were when Prince wooed Hero for Claudio at the mass party, and when Prince, Claudio, and Leonardo made Benedict believe Beatrice had fallen in love with him. The prince uses the word circled, referring to marriage in the first scene. In the second scene, Claudio uses the word most, which means to be in love. In scene 1, everyone was at a party and were wearing masks. Full head and face masks were common at this time. Dress pants and blue jeans were in style and were worn with dress shirts and jackets. In society, men were expected to dress like this every day and when they went out in public. Women wore flowing or fitted skirts. When women went out and wanted to dress up nice, they wore a skirt with a suit jacket along with hat, gloves, and a handbag. When women and men went out, they wore nicer clothes, and when they were at home, they wore comfortable clothing. During the warmer months, women wore long, flowing sundresses and other wavy dresses.
In Act 3, the window scene we depicted the perfect 1950s dream home, being 2 stories, but what was not depicted was not a social norm for the time period. Premarital sex was frowned upon during this time period. Women at this time period were expected to be respectful and ladylike, being the perfect housewife, taking care of the kids and the home. Women still didn't have this equal rights as men and were still not seen as the same. In Act 3, Scene 3, we depicted Conrad and Borachio walking down the street just after Borachio had finished messing with the fast girl Margaret. At the time, the slang meaning messing was fooling around sexually, and fast meaning someone who is sexually active. The casual clothing worn by the men was common for the era, and even for the watch, acting as undercover cops to spy on Conrad and Borachio and listen in on their conversations, wore similar clothing to fit in with society.
The scenes we portrayed in Act 4 were when Hero was slandered by Claudio at the wedding, and when the Watch and Dogberry interrogate Borachio and Conrad. In the first scene, we changed the dialogue of Claudio. He calls her a shuck and a fast. A shuck is a liar and a cheater, and to be a fast girl is to be frequently sexually active. Then, in the next scene, we replaced slander with belittlement because it was more common at the time. And we said fraud to replace them from saying Margaret was portrayed as Hero. In the interrogating scene, It is a dark, secluded room because at the time, police tried to use this scare tactic to get people to talk. As for the wedding, we tried to represent a small chapel as best as possible.
In the pictures shown of X Files, it's prevalent that throughout history, people wear black clothing to funerals. Claudio, therefore, wore black modern clothing. As for the wedding, Hero was wearing a white dress with a white fur coat. The white symbolizes purity within Catholic religion. She was wearing a fur coat because those were quite common of the upper class. Women usually dress to respect Catholic religion. The friar is a priest because of Catholicism was more prominent. Tombstone is a very plain and simplistic style due to the mass production of the tombstones within World War II. As for the scene in which Benedict challenges Claudio to a duel, the reason being is how in the 1950s men would fight for their rights as a term called duel to settle a point of honor in which Benedict was doing Beatrice's work in favor for her to make Benedict kill for her to please herself and for Claudio not to marry Hero.